talk to you.
Okay.
So I'm talking funding.
You're talking funding.
That's why I want to talk to you.
Everything that comes up.
I'm a really nasty bastard on those issues.
Edward.
Edward is in, and Edward's shown his face, and he was here on time.
We have two apologies. One from Gary and speedy recovery and the same with friction.
I would move both those. Yep, second it.
Any discussion? All in favour?
Aye.
Right. Gary, thank you. The public forum, there are no such requests. The public forum, please. Confirmation of the agenda.
Apologies. Just for noting that there are some papers that have come to us late, and that's with an understandable reason, and the public excluded, but there are no changes or amendments to that. The only amendment, and I will take leave, that I can change the order of the closed papers should we be running at a time that is more efficient for us to take the second paper first.
Sure, I understand.
At the time, if that's all right. With that leave, I will move that the confirmation of agenda, seconded Councillor Noon. Any discussion? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Conflicts of interest, just remind you that you need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between your role as an elected representative and any private or other external interests that you may have. And that's noted for you to self-declare at the time or now if you so wish.
Yes, I'll be standing aside Councillor Wilson at the late paper on the carbon forestry.
Thank you.
I bloody well hope you're not owning any.
Well, I think I'm going to ask that we actually, that you note that you've got that interest and we may have that discussion with advice at the time.
Yep.
And thank you. Confirmation of the minutes. We've had those all pre-circulated.
Yep.
Anyone wish to move the minutes of the 14th of April? Thank you, Councillor Calvert and Councillor Hope. Any discussion? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Outstanding actions. Any comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, just in relation to the South Dunedin, I know Andrew, our Chair, gave some feedback this morning, but nevertheless...
Microphone, please. Sorry, there are others listening in. Thank you.
Nevertheless, what it says is that we're awaiting a formal position from councillors. I suspect we could be waiting for quite a period. What's the next step?
Councillor Noon.
Through the Chair. Based on the last conversation I had with Mayor Hawkins, which was probably about 10 days ago, the impression I got was that they were wanting to form a position, their council wanted to form a position about the strategy that has been prepared for the St Clair, St Kilda, sand dune issues, and until they discuss that and understand what their position is in a more of a holistic sense going forward, that's why those comments in there about a formal position from their councillors. So he really wants to discuss that with his council first before he has a conversation with us.
But we might, through Madam Chair.
Yes.
But that was a part of what I was saying this morning. We might have some informal discussion, so at least we understand their timelines and understand our timelines.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that there will be a conversation that will happen at some point in the future, and maybe as Marion has suggested, just taking a slightly different tack. In the meantime, may not be absolutely what we've committed to, but it may help to get to that point and having formal conversations at a later date.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Also, something about public transport trial.
So was in the confirmed minutes on page 7, under the first resolution under that is, I think, what you're talking about?
Yes, I'm just wondering, I'm not seeing it in the action plans, sort of.
So that was about the specifically add in the consultation for requests of trial units and routes that could be incorporated into the plan. That was an action that hasn't made it to the action plans. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I couldn't be part of that meeting of council, so I don't know where it left.
I'm just starting to follow through resolutions where they turn into actions.
Appreciate that. Can we just note that? I'm not sure how we can deal with that. It says we all agreed it was part of the minutes. I'm not quite sure it hasn't been carried on with.
Can you just refer me to the right thing?
Page
again?
7. It's a motion moved by Councillor Noon and Councillor Scott. It's at top one. It's got one beside it, but they all do.
Oh, I see.
And it's the last part of that resolution. I think the issue here is that we haven't specifically asked for that. We had wanted that in order to have an inkling of what trials could be provided for. We had sought advice from the staff as to the wording of that at the time. And I don't know that's happened. We can only ask if anyone is listening to please advertise that we are interested in knowing those trials, I suppose, and promote it ourselves. At the moment, we've been somewhat.
Might be just something that we think about when we're tidying up our resolution making processes.
Thank you. Noted. I can't do anything else.
I mean, Madam Chair, I don't understand the difference between resolutions and actions. So should that resolution have gone into an action?
Well, I think so. It was resolved to do that, and the action should have been that in the consultation, but we didn't do it.
How does that process work? Is it the person who actually does that?
So,
Well, I think staff
so
activate it.
To the action last.
You can't see what she's saying. So if you tell us that you want an action,
Yeah, we're
it
about
gets
the
recorded.
It's page 7.
That is what a resolution is.
Added
Yeah.
onto the, yes,
Yeah.
I understand.
Can we have the microphone, please? Can't hear you.
Sorry. I turned you off. Sorry.
But sometimes you don't put things in resolutions, but you'll say that's an action point. And so we need to gather information from two different sources. One is the minutes where you raise action point, and the other is where you pass resolution. So there are two things that go on. You do. Yeah.
Well, I think resolutions are those matters which this council resolves for staff to do, but that's fine. It was raised at the time, I think, at the council meeting.
Is your question, sorry, Chair, but is your question, did we undertake the last part of the resolution? Because
that I think
it
was.
seems that you are suggesting we didn't, but I don't know that for certain.
I don't think
I
we
wasn't
specifically
suggesting we
asked for
didn't.
it.
I was just asking, since it didn't seem to have appeared in the action. I'm just trying to start us tidying up our processes about how we get things from here to there and get them better.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions under the action plan? Are we happy with just to note those responses? Do we note those? Is it a motion or just, we don't, do we need a resolution for the action plan, just a note? No, thank you. Thank you. Then, going for the matters for consideration under item 7, the first one, 7.1, amendment 3 to the NPSFM 2020. So this is amendment to our plan, of the regional plan, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Rather, because of the NPSFM. Yeah. Gwyneth. Sorry.
Trying to get that Monday stuff in your calendar.
Sorry. Welcome. Now, have we met Melanie before?
No.
Hello, Melanie.
Hello.
Welcome to council.
Thank you.
To the table. Now, would you like to speak to the report before questions?
Yes.
Will you take it? Okay, great.
We'll just quickly explain, why we're doing this now. The matter of some of the provisions in the NPSFM 2020 came up in the context of Plan Change 7, and we provided legal submissions during the course of that the question was around what without unreasonable delay meant. We had originally intended just to include these when we notified in 2023. There was some inference from the court that perhaps we could be doing it sooner than that, and hence you've got this plan change now. It doesn't need to go through the Schedule 1 process, so it is just a matter of changing the plans to insert those provisions, which Mel has done. And this is just for your information. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have, but that's the genesis of why it's here before you now.
Thank you. Chris, Melanie, do you have anything else to say? Happy to answer questions. Great. Councillor Calvert.
So this is an amendment to the regional plan.
Yes.
So is that something, do we usually note amendments, or do we usually, is that our involvement with an amendment in the normal course of events?
Yes, so this is different to a plan change or a variation, which you would normally see and approve. An amendment to the regional plan, the delegation sits with me. So I can make the authority to do this and have done, and that's why it's going through.
And that's because it's a
because the government
it's an amendment, and because
yes, that's right.
It's following a requirement.
So because there's no public process involved in this part, the government have just mandated that we shall do it. There's no risk with the delegation sitting down at my level.
Right. Thank you. I've got you next, Councillor Laws.
Yes. So I'd like to clarify that. There is nothing in these amendments so this is a directive from on high. We're required to apply.
That's correct.
And there is nothing that flows from this that would see us possibly amend it from public submissions or consultation.
So what the NPS...
Or is that Plan Change 7?
So what the NPS says is to insert these provisions or words similar, so they don't have to be exact. We've just put exactly what they say in.
Okay.
So they're now part of the operative water plan, and they will be considered and, if necessary, adjusted as part of the FMU process when we go through. So they may not look exactly like this in 2023. They'll be or similar, and they might have some nuances for FMUs if that's required.
And that was my next question. I've read through this and I don't quite understand what the practical implications are for us.
So in terms of...
I mean, apart from words, how it applies on the ground. What changes will occur out there on the ground as a consequence of us putting these in?
So these are matters that the consents team they were already having regard to them because they're in the MPS, but they're now in the regional plan water. So they're matters that they'll be considering when they're assessing a consent application.
So, for example...
That's the extent of what they will do at this point in time. They're consent matters now.
So, for example, clause 326(1, fish passage. Does that mean that when the consents team come to look at it, they will now apply a slightly different test to a resource consent?
It means they have to have regard to that provision in the plan.
Don't take this the wrong way.
Okay.
But what that sort of seems a bit weaselly in the sense of regard to.
Yep.
I want to know, will this change how resource consents are in practical terms? Or is this just, there's some nice words here that the government's put in and we'll just shove them in there?
So the Act says that a consents officer has to have regard to an MPS under section 104(1)(c) of the Act. But I'm not a consents officer, Councillor Laws, so that's as much as I can tell you. Will the consents team know that they're going in?
If I was a consents officer and I was looking at this, I would look at this fish passage piece and I would ensure that any application that I was looking at was consistent with it.
Can I just suggest that the purpose of putting this in the water plan is that any reader of the water plan realises that that's something they have to meet, not because it's not otherwise obvious that it's in an NPS.
I'm trying to derive what the difference is before and after these go in.
So the difference...
Chair, we didn't have a provision like this before, so I would anticipate that a consents officer would look at this differently or look at the water plan with an additional lens or an additional matter to look at.
Sorry, can I just, for clarity, I think the timing's an issue here. The consent staff, as soon as the NPS-FM came in, had to have regard to it. Putting it in the water plan means that the person reading it as an applicant will understand that that's the process, because it wouldn't be obvious to them as an applicant that that would be a consideration. Isn't that a better to focus on the reader of the document who wouldn't otherwise know it? Because the consent staff...
That's an equally valid reason that that it's been done. Sure. Yep.
Sorry, Councillor Hobbs and then Councillor Scott.
Just to verify, this is to the current water plan for Otago, which is incomplete on a number of issues. We're amending that. So then to be added later on, replicated on water and land 2023.
So through you, Chair, a really interesting distinction is that this requirement to insert these is into an operative plan. These don't apply to Plan Change 7 because it's not operative. But as and when Plan Change 7 becomes operative, we'll then have to mimic this process for Plan Change 7.
Councillor Scott?
Yeah, my question, I would like to think that what's proposed here will have implications a bit more than just how we judge a consent. I mean, what I read is that for natural inland wetlands, they have to be, the loss of has to be avoided, the values protected, and their restoration promoted. So my question is, as a regional council, over and above consents, what are we going to do so that their restoration is promoted? Even in consents, I would like to think that the consenting pathway will be streamlined, costs, etc., will be accessible in terms of enabling, will be enabling.
Sorry,
that whole thing.
Yeah, we're just bringing back, this is a regulatory process of making our documents be up to speed that's required. You're going into extra stuff over and above that.
No, it's part of our water plan. It's part of our foundation.
We're not doing a plan. What you're talking about is doing a plan change, which is over and above this, though. This is about setting. Well, my understanding is this is us pulling a bit that's sitting out here and putting it into our plan because it's required to be in the plan.
Yeah.
Can I just add, maybe help Brian? So now we're aware of this coming through with the NPS-FM. Our science team is looking and building into their work program an understanding of where we would expect fish passages to be, looking at all the different indigenous fish, and also same with wetlands. So we've got a big program lining up to try, and we know the wetland definition has changed, so we've to make sure that we can build up the information so that when the consents come through, the relevant information is there for them to refer to. No. So we are well aware, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we have got it built into our program now around fish passage and wetlands, so that the technical information will be there to make decisions on it as well.
Cool. And in relation to like wetland consents from a regulatory perspective, we had a bit of a process there with Waipahi. Is there an opportunity that our whole consent cost thing will be more enabling as opposed to...
I think that's
as we've discussed. Oh, sorry. I don't know. Is he here this week? That's a different discussion to have through the long-term plan process around fees and charges, not unrelated to this.
No, fair enough.
Thank you. Edward, have you got your hand up there?
Thank you. On the ground, I was just wanting to understand that in a resource consent process, that this noting of these elements will have the effect of customary use or harvest becoming a Māori will actually be given some attention. Currently, in some of the consents we're hearing that they are disabled currently under the existing plan. Those processes, is this going to help rectify that?
So through you, Chair, Edward, policy 1048 talks about avoiding loss of natural wetlands except where the loss arises from exercise of customary harvest, for example. So I would anticipate that it should make that position clearer for the consents team and for applicants, and that should elevate that up.
Did you get that,
Thank
Edward?
you. Yes, I would. Decision makers will be second will apply to decision makers, commissioners.
Thank you.
Just ask one further question very quickly.
Yeah, I think I have.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Malcolm first.
So I understand what's happening here, I'm pretty sure, but so this is really a timing issue. So technically you wouldn't have to write this into your plan until you redid your plan?
And so the law says as soon as reasonably practicable.
Right, so...
It's too long away.
So that's, so the definition of reasonably or without unreasonable delay, the court has said, so we're going into it. Is it correct to say that a national policy statement that comes down, we can actually put more stringent demands on our environmental controls than is asked by the national policy statement?
Through you, Chair, yes, there are aspects that we can have stringency under the MPSFM.
Right. So if we're giving regard to these figures, I just wonder why we wouldn't wait. Why we wouldn't wait and do it at.
So the direction from the court was that waiting until 2023 wasn't without undue delay. So we should do it ahead of 2023. But that refinement on an FMU scale is likely to come through. So if we need to be more stringent, in particular FMUs around some of these issues, then that FMU process allows us the opportunity to do that.
And just subsequent to that, what was the real, knowing that we have to give regard to whatever the national policy statement says, and knowing that it's your job, why was that direction given by the court when in fact it's the normal process? So what have they said about, particularly probably ORC, why have they said?
No, so through you, what the court said is, what is your time frame for doing this, having regard to the law that says you should do it without any unreasonable delay or whatever the exact words are. Cool. And our legal submissions just said, we acknowledge the law and it will be done as soon as possible now. So they didn't say, why haven't you done it? They said, this is the law. Can you set out your understanding aligns with ours? And we said, yes, it does. And then they asked when we were doing it. They didn't tell us to do it.
Cool.
There was a strong inference that we should do it as soon as reasonably practicable.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Laws.
Fish. I'm struggling to see why we're trying to increase passage for trout, beyond me. But there you go. How are fish defined? Galaxids and indigenous fish, do they have priority under this, or are all fish regarded as equal?
So the MPSFM says all fish are regarded as equal unless you need to provide for galaxids, and then they trump non-galaxids or natives, rare and threatened species. So the MPS does prioritise threatened fish over non-threatened fish.
Right, so we wouldn't be therefore in consents increasing the access of trout if they were to threaten the habitat or galaxid.
Unlikely to.
You'd be no, wouldn't it? Rather than unlikely?
It should be no.
We have to take every case on its merits, and so it would be inappropriate to say.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay. Yeah.
Could I just ask one question following up from Councillor Malcolm, and that is, if we wanted to be more stringent, that process would be a plan change that would require consultation and couldn't be done in this method.
Yeah, absolutely. So that stringency would come through that FMU process and be part of the land and water plan and subject to the full range of consultation.
Yeah, or if we wanted to do it before that, for example, I don't know why, but just checking that it wouldn't be the simple sign-off.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you. Does anyone? That is the end of the questions. Sorry,
Oh, I'd just like to move the motion.
You would like to move the motion as per the order paper?
I think Edward has his hand up.
And Edward has his hand up again. Is that seconded,
I
Edward?
just thank you, Councillor. Just a question, is this applicable to hydro dams as well? Structures and rivers and fish passage?
Not is it?
So through you, Chair, as far as I'm aware, the objective relates to every activity that's in the water plan, unless an MPS says it doesn't. So,
but wasn't hydroelectric
excluded? Has some exemptions around NOF standards, but I would anticipate that this would be something the consent team would be looking at for hydro activities, notwithstanding there's no application before them.
So we've got a mover in Councillor Deaker, seconded for Councillor Hope. Any discussion, debate? Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Deaker?
No, I don't.
Any discussion? No right to reply. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, staff.
That was good.
The next paper today is Building Code Update Consultation 2021. Warren. Kia ora and welcome. Oh, and Gwyneth. You come up for this one. Warren needs his hand held.
So this submission, very quickly, and I'll get Warren to perhaps add, is come about because when we had our discussion around the submission to the NES air quality last year, you indicated, I guess, a direction, which was you would like to see. Yep. You would like to see. Sorry, it seems to. It's on a.
Talk.
Can you hear me now?
No. Oh, it's not.
Yep. No.
Might be a bit dodge.
Not sure.
Just
hold it. Yeah. Like that. I guess a more integrated approach at the central government level in terms of addressing air quality issues. So when this came across Warren's desk, he had that in mind and thought it would be a good idea or to suggest to you that we do make a submission, hence this paper. Do you want to add anything else?
No, that sort of steals my thunder. Yeah, it just seemed like a good opportunity, sort of the more holistic approach. It's sort of 1 degree of separation from a regulation we normally have responsibility for implementing. But as we saw, there's some opportunity just to raise some points there where we see some wider benefit that we're interested in.
Thank you. Any questions? I have one. I'm thrilled to see that we have nuanced New Zealand into 6 categories rather than 3.
Yes.
But I am surprised that they've gone with district boundaries as opposed to temperature gradient maps when the science, I think, is available. So as someone who lives in the, well, maybe I've picked up, the Dunedin and Clutha are light blue, as in zone 5, I think, on the map on page 40, where there are, and Oamaru is not, is in 7, is in zone 6. I would have thought that, living in a relatively cold climate as I do, that we may have been right up there within the coldest of places, and I would have rather seen this based not on districts, but by what I think would reflects temperature, minimum temperatures, say 10 days minimum temperatures of below 5 or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. My understanding is that they've sort of done this remapping using NIWA climate modelling. It's sort of a wee bit outside of certainly my wheelhouse, but I did have a look to in the discussion they do explain that that's essentially how they've derived this new mapping and the logic behind it. So beyond that, I'm not sure that there's much I could offer in how we might challenge.
But
challenge that
I'm
mapping.
very surprised that the catchment-based project, which is the urban boundaries, or sorry, district boundaries, reflected climate. But maybe I'm wrong.
Are you suggesting, submission-wise, that we would say we think it should reflect that map? The rule should reflect that map, not reflect our boundaries.
Yes.
That insofar as they're in our boundaries, they should reflect that map.
I think a nuance.
Is that the submission?
Yes, yeah. And I'm just testing that.
Yeah. I guess there probably is a bit of a practicality around the district boundaries in terms of being able to implement it. So it might not be as nuanced as the model. I'm sort of make a bit of a guess at this. It might be not as quite as nuanced as what the NIWA model might have spat out, but it might actually it might reflect the ability to implement it through the planning process on a district boundary level. Now, if you're interested in us making a point that you think the North Otago or the Waitaki District Council should or shouldn't be in, then I'm happy to, I guess, ask for the background model and see if we have any ability to kind of understand why they've chosen that. But
yeah.
Yep.
And I'm not getting into debate. I'm trying to actually ask questions. So if you're in an airshed area that's got a real concern of fire smoke, and it's that nuance. I mean, I think we've got huge data resources now to understand the stuff better and map it better. And those areas you'd want to have higher insulation so that people aren't burning as much, especially with the electricity situation looking relatively poor this year. I think I'm disappointed that we haven't got to that granular level of being able to impose these rules. And it's not a criticism of staff, it's just that I think the government could be doing better. This is something that probably set in place will stay around for 20 years and will have an effect for 100 years if those houses are built to those standards. It's a really long tail to this that I'd like to get the best that we can get by having the best data source at the start. If that makes sense.
And so we can build into the submission that we think the next steps would be to get more granular, if that's what you're after.
Can I move a resolution to that effect then? Or to put it another way, since something doesn't exist unless it's a resolution, which we're learning and we're doing better than maybe we'll work on it. Could we, rather than just Winna saying she could I move that we do?
Can we hold the resolution? These are question times at the moment, and we'll get to those points of raising those questions, and we'll do it at the end. And we'll do all of that at the end, if that's okay, and as part of the other resolution. I'm just checking that makes sense to you to go to that degree of granularity. Any other questions, Councillor Hope?
I wanted to ask you, please, on that figure 1.2, sorry about that, the heating and cooling energy saving for each climate, where have they taken that from, please? Is that another NIWA, or have you any idea?
Well, that's the work that MB has conducted in putting this together. That's the assessment they've made. I probably can't tell you more specifically about the work without sort of digging into that a bit further.
Thank you. I'll leave it there at the moment. If I think of something, I'll come back here.
Councillor Forbes?
No more questions. I'd like to put the motion at some point.
Okay, well, yeah, we've got a first motion on.
I want to talk about something, that's all. I don't have a question.
So, Councillor Scott?
Yeah, when I first, read this report, I wondered why we were getting involved, in terms of our relationship with the Building Act. And okay, there's the air thing, and we have beat our chest and said that needs to be improved. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to get involved in the detail. I think there's numerous examples where you can have a principle without necessarily going into the detail. But nevertheless, I persevered and looked at the report, and I thought that going back to your question about the climate zones, the fact that inland Otago and Southland and Stewart Island were grouped together, whereas coastal Otago and Canterbury were grouped together. And I thought that was a step forward. And then the other thing
Is this a question? Because it's a very long one at the moment.
Okay, well, what do you think about that then?
No, so the first part of the question is going to be answered by the CEO. Sorry.
So I was just going to mention that you'll remember that we went through our exercise of setting strategic directions.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, I don't have the wording exactly, but the strategic direction you set talked about healthy homes. So it wasn't just about air quality, but it was expanded to take into, warm homes and those sorts of things. Hence why we've linked our activity back to that strategic direction.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, have you another question?
No, I will speak when it comes to the vote.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, now, sorry, Councillor Hawkes.
What I couldn't understand, so I went through insulation standards, great, and you came to transitional timeframes, and I'm looking at, what am I looking at? Under discussion, transitional timeframes. Do I get it that we are saying that this should be done within 1, 2 and 3+ years? That new housing should meet those standards?
Yeah, so the suggestion I guess I made is that it's getting a little bit outside, certainly my understanding, to make a stronger recommendation, that it was better left between MB and the industry as to what would be most appropriate.
That's all right.
Given there's some cascading effects.
That makes sense, because MB will know what I was getting nervous about was this trouble we're having at the moment with stuff coming in, being imported, that we need to actually meet certain standards. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got a motion first from Councillor Calvert, who wanted to do an amendment to the motion. There's two ways we can deal with this. Sorry, I've left that off. One is we take the motion that's on the table, which I think is what you indicated you want to move, Alexa. And did you want to do an amendment to that, Councillor Calvert, or did you want to do it together as amended?
I think I wanted to add to the resolution another one saying to put in some...
How about something to the extent of approves the attached submission, nuancing a more granular climate zones based on temperatures?
Yes.
I think what you're asking for is that we request that consideration.
Yeah.
Yes.
I said the submission,
Yeah.
Voting the submission.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, I'm going to put something like that. On that basis, are you both happy to move and second that?
I'm happy to second it. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Let's just get the word right. Can we just take it? So it's approves the attached submission. Is it nuancing, or you said something else?
Requesting the consideration of...
Yes.
It's another point, isn't it? We're asking them to do something else. The other thing we're asking them to do is to consider a more granular approach to the climate regions.
Could we avoid
based on climate
cliches like granular? That doesn't mean anything to them.
What you're really saying is
temperature gradients,
you're requesting consideration of using the climate maps for boundaries as opposed to regional boundaries.
Exactly.
There you go.
Well done. Yes.
They already are.
No, they're about the original.
No, that's not what it says in the report.
On the maps, it does.
The maps are district council borders.
So the fruit growing conditions.
Oh, district council.
Okay. Did you get that?
They're quite wrong.
Okay. So he approves the attached submission requesting consideration of using climate maps for boundaries as opposed to district boundaries. I'll do it as a 3. Okay.
Just do it as a 3, Diane.
Thank you.
So
it could be problematic.
So 3.
3. Okay.
So next thing, requests.
Well, we can just enforce our bit of it.
In the submission.
Within our boundaries, which we're used to doing. I think wallabies.
Consideration
of using climate maps for boundaries
as an alternative to regional boundaries.
Or district.
District
Yeah, district. It's district at the moment. That is, I think that's where this, for me, if this is based on science, it's great that they're doing 6 instead of 3, but they could do it better. I think it's the messaging. But the person who wants to say what the messaging is the mover. Would you like to talk to your motion?
I just want to thank you very much for doing this, because it is seriously time we got involved in this. Our involvement so far, the air plans and kind of hands off and a little bit of cosy home stuff and things, has not produced the desired qualities, the desired results in air qualities, nor better building standards, nor better homes, really. And I think we need to get involved. And we've often talked around this table about getting far more proactive, and this is doing that. So I really thank you for that. I'm really impressed to have seen this here. I don't think people in Wellington can understand our conditions and our position without us doing these approaches, and so we need to be advising them, and this is a great example of doing that. So thank you very, very much. I liked the way you'd gone through it. When I first read it, the submission itself, I thought, it's a bit concerning, maybe not going far enough. Then reading your reasoning for putting us in the position that you did, I did come to agree with you, so thank you. That's it. Put the motion.
Any other people wish to speak to it? Councillor Scott?
Yeah, the key thing that I liked about this is what we're advocating for under option 2 is that our insulation will be the same as international standards. That's right, yes. So that's the key thing from my perspective, not whether we're involved or not involved, it's actually that we're supporting the implementation of international standards, which is a good expectation. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I should have said that I may still foreshadow, depending on how this all goes, a fourth, which is requesting the consideration of where there are air shed issues, that higher insulation standards be considered at site by site. Only because I think that is we have to start worrying about power, and I should have said that earlier on, but I'm happy if I don't get a seconder as well. Any other discussion on these ones? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Could I add the fourth one now? And I appreciate that it's not necessarily one that everyone appreciates, worries about, that where there are mapped areas of air, what is air shed?
The air sheds, the area of poor
air because of fires. That if those houses are insulated to the highest possible standard, then you don't exacerbate it. But I mean, the heat of the fire keeps. You don't have to keep on stoking the fire, really.
That's right.
But, and so it's that nuance that isn't here. I know that we're dealing with this at one level we could or couldn't, but the air is our domain, and so that's where I don't again think this is nuanced, that there is potential to have a higher standard where there is an issue of air quality, and that would. Well, the question I should ask first is, does that make sense to say that should be a higher insulation standard, or be done quicker to ensure that the air is improved?
I guess as we've had this debate quite a few times, there's actually multiple things that need to be done. And of course, the higher the standard you put in, and I think you'd be thinking about exactly what that is, because we need a standard to work to. It's going to make some improvement. I guess it's a cost benefit kind of question that arises as to whether that's where you put your efforts. I guess that's the only consideration I would have in terms of thinking about it, the cost benefit. But the principle of it being that greater insulation leads to less use of wood burning, which is a primary source for us in Otago in the air sheds where we do have air quality issues, then yes, in principle that would contribute to making improvement.
That's my question.
Would you want that further consideration should be given to the relationship between insulation and
air quality
in poor airshed areas? Is that what you want?
No, sorry.
Consideration should be given to insulation standards in areas of
further consideration be given to.
to insulation standards in
insulation standards?
areas with a poor air shed.
I think you need to relate it back to home heating though.
Yeah. Yes.
For clarity.
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
are you therefore suggesting that we add this
to the submission?
To the submission.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to get
yes.
at.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually say that.
No, we're just working on it. So it would be in the submission we do this, yeah. So yeah, I haven't got a seconder yet.
Yes, I'm about to
sorry.
second.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to ask you a question.
Requesting the submission consideration to be given to installation standards.
Picking up the point of Chief Executive, do you want to?
Is air shed is SH?
ED, shed.
Yeah,
that's right.
So you want to include the home heating? How would you put that in, Chief Executive?
So this is what we have at the moment. It's jammed, sorry. Sorry, yes, a question from Councillor Hope. I'm sorry.
That's right, through the chair. I'm happy to support what you want to have in that submission. I just want to ask you a question, if I may. Now, I read your letter in support of the submission, and I think I know what you're getting at. It's just the way you've worded it. Can I just clarify with you what you say here? So this is on perhaps your second page. You just said the extreme cold of Otago's winters, access to free or cheap fuel, rising energy prices and poor quality insulation in many homes. Now, when you talk about access to free or cheap fuel, you're meaning fuel, am I correct, to fuel of fire?
Yes.
Yeah, it was just the way you wrote it, and I read it, and I thought, actually, I just wanted to clarify
We
that.
could put fuel for heating.
Yeah, that's okay. It wasn't nitpicking,
We'll put
I
fuel
just
for heating.
wanted to clarify. Thank you for that.
I think this is just about to go up.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's not quite there. As an addition. All this pressure, Diane.
Oh, I know.
Don't worry about the names. Just get the motion up.
Yeah, I'm very. Go back into the submission, sorry.
No, does it?
Let's go back into the submission.
And I'm just going to check. Edward, are you happy with this so far? Because I can't see your hands anymore.
I go over to the letter,
Yeah.
just submission, and in the submission it does talk about
Option 2.
Okay, this is the motion. You can all see it now?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any...
Does
we
that
don't need to add
encapsulate
any, do
what
we?
our Chief Executive suggested?
You're happy with that now? Yep. Sure. Thank you. I think staff, you can understand where that is sort of taking us to.
I just can't quite see it, that's all.
Oh. Can you just push it down a bit? So.
I'll swap places with you, Brian.
Can I just quickly, just the wording thing there?
Oh, got
It's airshed as a result of or from home heating, not for home heating.
Yeah,
we
sorry.
don't have an airshed.
Sorry. Good point. Thank you. Are we okay? We know what we're voting on. Any further discussion on that? It's been moved and seconded and talked to by me enough.
Should be air quality.
All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Well done.
That moves us on to page 318 of our agendas. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
This is groundwater SOE recommendation update. So this came out of data and
Information.
thank you. Hello, Edward. Hand is up. Hello, Amir. No, it's
Mia.
Amir. Sorry.
Yeah.
Welcome. Amir, do you wish to talk to this report? Either of you?
I think you just summed it up. You made a resolution in Oamaru in terms of giving some more detail around when some of the recommendations would be implemented.
Yep.
And this is what we've...